Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stool podcast, a podcast for woodworkers and the maker community in general. This is episode number 7. My name is Robin Lewis from robinlewismakes.com. I'm joined by Joey Chalk from King Post Timberworks.
How you going?
And John Crawford from Periodic Furniture Studio.
Hello.
We live stream the recording on YouTube every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time or UTC plus 10. Or you can watch or listen to it later on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We'll get your comments towards the end of the show, but feel free to chat amongst yourselves. The idea being that this is also a place for people to meet. Before we get into this week's episode topic, let's do a rundown of what we're working on. So, Joey, let's start with you.
Right. I hadn't written anything down. What have I been doing? I had to make some roof racks for my van, and they worked out pretty cool, I think.
Out of timber?
I was going to do that, and then when I went to the hardware store, I found like a length of steel square tube, and it was exactly the right length to cut it in half, and I'd have 2 roof racks. And I machined up a couple of aluminium spacers. I've got a steel lathe, so I machined up some couple of custom parts, and it took me about 2 hours, and it was done. So that was awesome.
And the actual connection to the car, how does that work?
Yeah, so I'm lucky in that the van I've got has got about 5 bolts in the roof for that.
Oh, okay.
And at the moment they've just got little space placeholder bolts in there with rubber washers in. And so just take out the ones I want, and I can just put a 6mm threaded rod right into the roof of the van. So really easy and tidy.
I've got a tiny little washing machine for a car, and I've thought about doing roof racks, but then you've got to buy this proprietary mounting kit, and it's extortionately expensive, which is why I've never got onto it.
Yeah, just throw a bolt right through the roof of the car. You'll be sweet.
Got a hole saw, you'll be right.
And I've been started to batch out my dining chairs for my house. So that's been going pretty good. I've spent the better part of this week just making jigs. I must be nigh onto 14 jigs for these chairs. But now that I've got those jigs, I've made 6 chairs today. So
yeah, the most amount of time goes into those jigs for a chair.
With the chairs, can you notice subtle differences between each one of them, or are they all pretty?
No, they are definitely different. No, I'm going to kind of ease out any little differences. There's a couple of parts where there's something. One of my jigs is having an issue, but so I've got about a 0.5 mm discrepancy in one of the joins, which just needs to pretty much sand it off. But otherwise, no one's ever going to sit them right next to each other. And in fact, if you do that, you can't really. There's nothing you can see. But I can see tiny little things, but they're so close. It's I think we ran the calipers over them, and they're give or take kind of 0.75 of a mil. So
geez, okay, so there's nothing
pretty
drastic.
close. Yeah.
What sort of joinery are you using?
I'm going to go right into this when I do the video for it, but I'm using the domino for everything.
Right.
And I've got 3. I think there's 4 different domino sizes. And one of them is standard. The other 3 I've made my own dominoes. And the idea being that I can 100% use machinery to do every piece. So really all I have to do after the final glue up is run over it with 400 grit to finish off.
Yeah.
That's the plan. Because I don't want to spend. It's the kind of thing that if I'm going to. Ideally, I'm looking at selling these or doing something with them. Now that I've got all the jigs, and I've been taking pretty close how much time I'm taking on them all, and it's working out that they could be cheap enough that I can sell them wholesale if there was an option for it. So I'm just really playing with what they're actually worth at this point if I were to go down that track. So
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm kind of considering a very similar thing, but
okay,
it's all these things on the back burner.
Yeah,
When I get around to it, though, yeah.
Because I had the idea, I knew I was going to make these chairs, and then after last week when you had mentioned kind of doing making some kind of something like you could sell like that, I thought, well, I'm going to have to make the jigs. I'm going to have them.
Yeah.
I might as well see if there's any interest in the design. So see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of selling the plans for it as well? Like the plans for the jigs?
No, the plans for the jigs is a completely different thing. I'm not into that. The way I make jigs is slap a piece of wood down and make it work for me, and that
Right, okay.
And then write on it what this jig is for. I don't plan out my jigs at all. I just got a scrap bit of plywood. Like, this is a good enough base size. I'll make my piece fit on it. It can hang over on one end. It doesn't bother because I'm only working on the other end. It's like, it's just got to hold my piece every time. That's all. It doesn't have to look pretty at all. So I'm thinking of selling the plans, but I'm still not sure what I want to do with that. Bit complicated. Suddenly give the design out takes the value away from me a bit. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, plans do quite well from what I've heard.
I know, and I think that plan would.
Yeah, is it worth that value?
I maintain value in holding the product and selling it myself locally, where there's a handful of stores who might be interested, or would I make some money, a decent amount of money, by selling the plans internationally?
You wouldn't want to do it necessarily like a commercial sale, though, would you? You would want to keep it for hobbyists if it's ideally the plans.
Yeah. So that was my other thought. Do I sell the plans to hobbyists who might want to make a set for their house?
And that's what I was asking about the jigs.
Or do I sell the plans with a licensing fee to someone who wants to commercially produce them? In which case it would be a one-off payment as a licensing fee. And then they can make as many as they like and sell them.
Yeah.
And it's whether or not there's any market there. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a pretty big topic as well.
Yeah. So that's me.
Cool. I have to pass this one because all I've been doing is working on my tan. I've been away on holiday and not done anything.
Been enjoying a couple of glasses of wine, I take it?
Yes, yeah, down at a few of the wineries, so it's been pretty glorious. But yeah, no, we're good.
Well, that's good. I don't think anyone's going to complain that you have nothing to talk about if you've been on holiday.
Talk about. I literally opened that
baby.
door and came to do this podcast. That's it.
Well, I've been working on a dining table, which is out of some reclaimed hardwood from this house. Someone mentioned that it might be spotted gum, which I've never worked with before, which is probably why I haven't been able to work out what it was. Probably the last time I do a reclaimed project for a very long time, because I feel like I've spent about a week milling. That's all I've been doing. I still haven't actually built anything. I've just been milling the damn timber. So I might go back to buying some dimensional lumber on the next project. But yes, I've been working on the dining table, and then behind me is a new workbench that I've been putting together just because there's no real storage in the shop yet. I kind of got the shop ready to be worked in and then just started working on projects, and so everything's still lying around on the floors and stuff. So I want to try and neaten the shop up. So yeah, it's just a quick and easy 2x4 workbench on wheels.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. So this week we had a topic from Jordan. When is good enough good enough? So sort of when have you reached the point that you should be happy with something you've built? So, Jordan, I know you had a bit of a story around this. Do you want to just give us a rundown of that?
Yeah, so it's going to be a bit freestyle because I haven't taken much down this week. But the inspiration for this topic came from a recent visit to a gallery which I used to look up to a lot in the southwest region. I won't name names because it sounds like it's shaming. But one that I used to look up to quite a lot. And when I kind of got there after a few years of actually doing this full time, I was quite surprised at what this guy is selling for. Dining tables starting at $8,500 and they go all the way up to $20,000. And what was kind of considered okay in the less than visible areas. So the biggest shock for me was the way the tabletops were getting attached onto his bases. Usually they're a trestle style base on all of them. The sight lines, or the gaps in the joinery were big enough to stick my pinky into.
What?
Yeah, like ridiculously large gaps. And it wasn't just
where's
one.
The gap?
So between the stretcher of the base and the bottom of the tabletop.
Oh, wow.
So it's hidden by all means, but still, to me, I would never let that kind of.
But then where was it joined? Because if you've got that gap, I mean, how was he joining it? It's a better question.
So, I mean, the way that I join most of my tables is the same way he does. So that L-shaped cleat, which goes into a slot on the actual base, so it allows it to move around a bit. But, it wasn't isolated to one table. It was every single one I looked at.
Did you happen to check if the tops were flat, if they just built up?
I didn't want to, take out a straight edge or anything, obviously, in his showroom, but sliding across it, they looked fairly flat. I mean, they didn't look dead flat, but flat enough was definitely on the top. But so it's got me thinking that maybe what he's doing to maintain heaps of thickness is he's only flattening one side and then leaving the bottom side just sanded, because most of these tables were slabs.
Right.
But it sparked this question in my mind that if this guy is selling these tables for $8,500-10,000 easily to a lot of people, am I putting too much effort into my finishing touches of my tables when I'm only selling them for about $3,000?
That's
because the other things, like there was a few other things which kind of got to me, which was on the glue lines around joints. It wasn't very well cleaned up, so you could actually see the glue in the finish, and it wasn't quite even.
Geez.
And this was a shock for me because I used to go to this gallery and just awe at how nice it was. And now it's kind of like, oh, maybe I'm too hard on myself.
But do you happen to think that their quality has changed since you were there last?
Well,
or you weren't picking up those details?
I don't think I was picking up the details so much. I don't think they are quite as good as they were, but I went to quite a few of the wineries which have his work in it from 5 years ago, and I had a quick sticky beak around there, and it had the similar problems. Like the underside had the same gaps, and the glue lines where the stretches came into the actual legs and stuff weren't incredibly cleaned up. So
because just from a quick technical point of view, from my experience, making like if you got a single slab top table, they're pretty straightforward. I mean, you're just essentially 4 legs and some stretches, and you throw up your cake of wood on the top.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I get that if it's something where you're wanting to maintain thickness, that you may not want to flatten the bottom. But in that case, what I do, because I have done it once before, is I recess out with a router sled the area where the base is mounted, so it's still a solid mounting point for the base onto the top and gives it plenty of support. So I don't know, like, when is good enough good enough? Because personally, in my workshop, if a table leaves here with even a slight gap in any joint, I'm not happy with it. I'll redo that part, or I'll keep fine tuning that joint until it's sitting just right.
What happens then? Because this is something I was probably going to bring up. So what happens when you don't see something like that for whatever reason, and it's not until, say, for me, it's happened I actually am carrying it out of my workshop to go into the van for delivery, and it comes into natural light, and you go, oh my God, I just seen this huge, or there's something blaringly obvious that I should have seen, but I didn't see it because of the lighting in my workshop. What do you do at that point? Where
that's happened to you. That's happened to me only once, where I've found something just before delivery, and I actually rang them and said, I've just noticed on your top that there's actually a bit of a smudged, cloudy bit in the finish. Obviously we want to have it perfect for you, so would you mind if it's another day or two for me to fix this for you? And they were completely fine with it. So that one occasion was fine.
Honesty thing as well.
Yeah. But I haven't really, I guess I may be a little bit too anal for stuff for at least really big things like that to come up. But
what I thought you were going to ask, Joey, is what's happened on the occasion when it slipped past everyone and the customer, the client has said, hang on a second, or is that never happened before?
It's not happened with me.
Yeah, it's happened for me where it wasn't necessarily a slip. This one, oh God, this guy, I made him a table, ordered it, and he loved it. He sat down and put his hands on the back edge of the stretcher rail under the tabletop. And I hadn't paid that much attention to that part. It was sanded, but it wasn't as nice as the top. He complained that back edge was too sharp because he always sits with his hands on that rail. That's how he likes to sit at a table, and it should feel really nice. And I'm like, okay, but shouldn't you have told me that when I was making? Like, I could have put handles there if you wanted. Like, and so actually, God, I can't remember what happened. Because it was finished, and I think I did go back and do it on site, just sanded it. But it was just like, that's a thing where the client should have told me about it, but I had to fix it anyway. I had to make an extra trip. It's just annoying.
That was going to be one of the points that I wanted to talk about is when you guys suss out, presumably a new client, can you tell the type of clients or the type of person that they're going to be so that you can gauge where good enough is? You can sort of tell that guy is going to be on the far end of good enough and that guy's going to be on the other end, or do you just work to your standard and that is the standard?
For me, my standard is the standard. But I mean, obviously, when I get a customer in, I can kind of gauge them, and I can feel how pedantic they're going to be about certain things. But often it surprises me. Like not that long ago, I had an engineer come to me for a few things, and I kind of, he showed me some drawings of what he was thinking, and to me, it was kind of ugly. So I just said, look, I can do this, no worries, but maybe if you want, I can sketch up a few other things and show you some alternatives, just which I think could look a little bit better. And I did that for him. He loved it, but the entire build, I was like, this has to be pristine because he's going to be really tight on me. And then when I finally got around to delivering it, he was the most relaxed and excited, and he loved everything. He just, couldn't have picked a single thing on it that he didn't like, apparently. Maybe it was making me feel better, but, But yeah, like they do surprise you. In other cases where I think they're pretty relaxed, I've sent it out and they've been kind of not, I wouldn't say difficult because they had something in their mind and it wasn't exactly what they wanted. So the clarity wasn't there. But I've never left anyone feeling like they've been ripped off. I always fix it or, repair what they don't like or whatever.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to touch on, which is kind of a different subject, but yeah, I will and have fixed up things that people aren't happy with. But I always think I'm a good, I think I can tell what clients are going to be like. But most of the time I'm completely wrong. like, for example, see, now here's one that you just can't, you have no control of. Delivered this big built-in bookcase. The lady was so happy with it. She's loading the books into it. Like, as I'm leaving, she's already got it, taking pictures of it. Yeah, this is the greatest thing we've ever had. By the time I got home, I had a big long email telling me how much she hated it, and I had to come and take it out.
Wow. So face value, nice.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
What was the reason?
There was a small detail. It was a internal corner bookcase, and there was a detail in the corner where the shelves met, that for complicated reasons had to be like it was, and it was not quite how I had drawn it, but it was something that I hadn't thought of in the drawing stage, and it really was not a big deal, but she noticed it. So that was number one problem. And number two, she decided she wanted it a different color, which is fine. I was like, well, you're going to have to pay for me to do an extra color. But it meant taking the whole thing back to the workshop to paint it, and then also to fix up this little detail, which meant actually rebuilding the whole thing. But
jeez. So nothing technically wrong, just more of an...
It was just... Yeah, it was like, okay, slightly different in the drawing. Like, I'm talking about 12 millimeters different. But the whole aesthetic, she just did not want it in the house. I couldn't believe it after she told me she loved it. So,
yeah, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, and so you can't tell what actually the reaction is going to be. And I'm actually always nervous when I drop a piece off, or when a client sees it for the first time. I'm sweating, holding my breath, because this is like, I want to get paid. I want to eat my dinner, and if you don't like it, that means I'm not getting paid. So
yeah.
So basically, that's the show. Thanks, everyone. When is good enough? Good enough? No one knows. There's just zero answer to this question.
I think Martin's answer was you just need to be happy with the quality of your own work. And it, where is it? I've lost it. But it was a good point by Martin.
You need to be happy with the quality of your own work, and it has to be up to your own standards. But you have to also charge accordingly for your work. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, on that delivery, I get the same thing, like clammy as anything up until nervous. And I've considered so many times of adding like a delivery fee and just getting proper removalists to come and do it. Just so I don't have to encounter it. But then if something isn't quite up to scratch, I'd rather be there.
You want to be there to explain something if there is something, because otherwise you feel like you're just kind of letting them deal with the problem, but not that there's a problem, which is the hard thing. So
it's saying that once you finish building it, that's it. Like, there's no more customer service, which is not something that's great. But anyway, on to
up till now, we've sort of been talking about when is it good enough for the customer. I guess we should also be talking about when is it good enough for us.
Yeah.
I broke this down into two areas. You've sort of got your design and your actual the build, the quality of the build. So those are two separate things. So from a design perspective, I guess it's a bit more fluid. Like there is no answer to this. I'm working on this dining table, and I came up with an idea for how I wanted to attach the rails to the legs, and my mind sort of just started wandering on all these ideas that I could do, and I eventually had to stop myself and say, that's all good and well, but this is never going to get finished if I want to try all these weird and wonderful things. But at the same time, I also don't want to bring it back to just being a standard mortise and tenon, because I've done it before. I want to push myself. So for me, that's like a real tricky one, is when is good enough that I'm going to be able to build this table, sit back and go, I've progressed as a woodworker. I've gone forward and not just done the same thing over and over again. For me, that's a super tricky one to work with.
Yeah. Another, like, on that point is, when is good enough, if you're designing stages, when is like your plan or your sketch good enough to actually take that from sketch to just start making? Because for me personally, I will never have a 3D model done with all the joinery and every little detail ironed out. I'll just have it there for proportions, know how big the top is, how tall it's going to be. and then, take that and start making it. But, that's good enough for me, but it might not be good enough for someone that is newer to the craft and really wants it all laid out to them exactly how it has to be.
Yeah, I guess that comes down to how you process the job. I guess probably we're a bit the same, where all those details are in our heads. We just need, generally, when I go into the workshop to start a project, I literally just have a piece of paper with just a box with height and length on it. That's the two numbers I have, and everything else I know how it's going to work, because once you join the first two pieces together, it's relative to that. The drawings are gone, unless you're fitting in a kitchen, which has to be fairly tight. But what was I going to say? I've lost it.
The other half of that is obviously the craftsmanship side of it. So that's I guess, which is a little more. It's a little more practical. It either looks good or it doesn't look good. Obviously, that's super personal. So it may work for you, it may not. But to me, that's a much more. I want to say difficult one to really dig into, because a lot of times I've finished a piece of furniture and it's not good enough. But it's because I've got to a point where I'm like, I need to get this done. I can't just live on this. I could pull the entire thing apart and start again. But do I want to do I want to punish myself like that? So yeah, from a skill perspective, I reckon if I was to sum it up, as concisely as possible, for me, as long as this join is better than, or my latest join is better than my previous join, for in any regard, then I'm okay, then I'm happy. But then at the same time, there have been times when I've said, you know what, I'm gonna have to be miserable and just deal with this.
Take it as a learning experience and call it that. Yeah.
So you were just talking about design before. So generally, I won't really start making something until the design is right, especially if it's for me. Like those chairs I'm working on, I've spent probably 3 months drawing and just thinking about what they're going to look like. So for me, I'm super now at the point where I like the design. But so a while ago, I had a client who wanted this kind of, it was, I think, going to be a TV cabinet, but it was so terrible. Her ideas were just disgusting. The design was absolutely filthy, and I did what I could to change her opinion, but it came down to this is what she wanted, and I made the drawings. And it was on top of that, it was difficult to make because it was curves everywhere, and just it's not cool. So yeah, what do you do when you have you ever had to work on something that is just awful looking, but you're getting paid to do the job and you're a professional, so you're going to power through. But it's very difficult, I found, to keep my standards to a point, because I hated everything I was doing, and I was like, oh, this doesn't matter. This is just shit.
I guess, you have to drop your standards to match those designs too.
Well, that's what I was going to mention as well. Yeah.
I've only really had it once where I felt ill by making something that I hated so much. It was just this absolutely hideous entry table, but that's what they wanted, and I was ashamed of it when I delivered it. Not that the joinery wasn't tight or properly done or anything like that. It's just I made something that looked that crap.
Yeah.
But when I delivered it, they loved it. They couldn't have been happier. I could have, but
it's so interesting to hear. It's so interesting to hear you guys talk about that distinction, from a client perspective. Because as someone who's not bringing in money from clients, well, not very much at the moment, I can't imagine ever looking at something and going, "Oh, that's ugly," even though I've created it really well. Because surely, if the joinery is good and it's to the design and the customer's happy, we're all good. But how could you not like that?
Well, it wasn't my design for one. They came to me with a photo and dimensions that they wanted it to. So that for that particular example. So yeah, it was a job more than a.
But your job as a custom furniture maker is not necessarily to do design. I mean, obviously that's part of it, but it's not necessarily. So if they say make this, you make this, and if you make this to a good enough standard, aren't you happy?
But I guess it comes down to the separation between designer and the aesthetics versus the physical piece. And while it's perfectly built, it just looks ugly, and you're kind of like, why? You don't have the same pride in the piece. Because, for example, the piece I made, I took one picture of it, and no one has ever seen that because it's terrible looking. I'm never going to show anyone this thing. But if something that I really do like, I'm going to show everyone. I'm going to put it on Instagram. So it's just having that kind of, I guess it's a little bit of a self-esteem boost that, look what I managed to make this awesome thing. And if you just don't have any pride in it, it's also very hard to be motivated to make that thing as well. You just start dragging your feet a bit.
Yeah, it's the motivation thing more than anything. If you're not liking something, you're not going to be as motivated to do it. So,
well, I'm still yet to be stuck in that situation. But yeah, from a when is it okay for stuff to not be good enough? I think the only time I can think of that you would really be allowed to forgo quality would be from a time perspective. Like, I'm guessing there must be situations where your customers have said to you, this has got to be done tomorrow, and you're like, well, it's going to be a bit average, and they say, well, that's fine, and off you go. Or do you guys say, nope, it's got to be to my standard, we're not rushing this?
That's an interesting point. I actually written down here. So when people ask me to do a quick sloppy job, like just make me a plywood box, I'll come in tomorrow and pick it up. 9 times out of 10, I will put way too much time into it and make it super duper awesome plywood box. And the customer's like, what have you done? Do you want more money for it? And just say, no, take it away. It's just an awesome thing. Because it's really simple for me to do well. But then if someone wants a super high-end, immaculate piece, the whole time I'm working on it, I'm double second-guessing myself and stressing out about every detail, and nothing's quite good enough because you know what the standard's meant to be. And every time you push a saw through the piece, push a saw through the wood, you're like, was that a mistake? And and if you've worked on a piece for 3 weeks straight, you don't want to even go near it. Like if you put a ding or dent in it, like you're it's not good. So that's an interesting kind of juxtaposition of how I work anyway.
Have you turned down any jobs because you felt like you wouldn't be able to make that up to your standard? So it was just too complex, just too technical.
You go, Jordan.
For me, I've not turned down anything that I thought was too complex, but I have turned down stuff which I think is too simple or is not worth my time. For example, is they wanted just MDF tables when they sent us this sketch, which was just a full sheet of MDF at the top, no treatment, a couple of legs which were just like a T-shaped base, no treatment, and a few boxes of the same design for the bases, and I had no idea what it was for. But when they contract me, it says, we need it as cheap as possible, blah, blah, blah. And it's as soon as they start doing that, it's just, no, I'm not.
As soon as they say, how cheap can we do this? You just like, no, we can't do it.
I have this, because I come from two worlds. I come from this event or theatre world where it is, we need this quickly and our budget is really tight. So I can understand that. But when you come to a bespoke furniture maker for something like that, I think it's a little bit cheeky. Sorry,
go on.
No, I'm done.
I have turned down a job because it was too complicated. But it was complicated because so this was an architect's home, and he was wanting to fit out the a big lounge room with very ornate Victorian moldings everywhere, like massive. These weren't just your standard colonial moldings. These were huge, multi-piece, complicated installments, and they were going to be made up of multiple pieces because they were so massive. And this guy had such technical drawings down to 0.5 millimeter. He'd measured his house. He'd measured how out of square his house was. And he had given me all these drawings and then said, right, it all has to be lacquer sprayed. And then I don't want any gap filler anywhere. It's just, if you follow my drawings, it'll go together perfectly and that'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, you're talking about putting like 600 mil wide crown moldings around your ceiling, being pre-finished, and you don't want any gap filling. You think it's going to go together perfectly, being pre-cut, following your plans. No, this is not going to happen.
No, not as long as there's a human involved.
Yeah, that would be a computer.
And so that was just this cannot work. Sorry. And I had started pricing it, and then he started telling me about all these requirements, and the price just kept going up. And then he's like, "No, this is ridiculous. You can't charge me this." I'm like, "Okay, see you later."
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to that sort of millimeter perfection, are you happy to, you start work on something and you're off by a millimeter, it then compounds into the next thing and now you're off by 5 millimeters. Is that still considered good enough considering everything is still tight and working well, or at that point have you now missed the mark?
Well, there's I guess, so if you're talking about, say, installs into a house, like cabinetry into a house, you always have a built-in scribing allowance. Usually for me it's 20 mil on each side. So while that's not ideal, I can lose all of that in my scribers and it's going to be fine. But if you're talking about that in a piece of furniture, that's obviously no-go. But in the same breath, I think it's worth mentioning that if you build a tiny little jewelry box, there can be absolutely nothing wrong with it. It has to be perfect. And if you make a built-in wardrobe that's 5 meters long and 3 meters tall, you can get away with a lot because for some reason, the fussiness of anyone, even us, goes down the bigger the project goes, the more allowance tolerances are acceptable. And I'm not sure why that is, but it's like pretty universal. The bigger the thing is, the worse it can be in a bad way to say it.
That's interesting. It's really true now that I think about it. From the couple of renovations that I've done around the home, and I say renovations in the sense that they are big projects. You're tiling a floor, you're putting in a 2 meter long bench top. You're sort of right. Like the room for error just seems to grow. Yeah. I've never really thought about it like that, but yeah, that's really true. You can, and I think also the bigger it is, the more chance you have. Well, maybe not the bigger it is, but you also introduce more options or opportunities to
fix things,
to fix and rein in those mistakes a little bit as well. Yeah, no, definitely. All right, I'm just going through my notes. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add to this?
I have one other thing written down, which was I did this job probably it must be 2 years ago now. And at the time, I was so happy with this job. It was, and actually still am. I think it turned out really well, and it kind of just harks back to what I was just talking about. So this was a giant install of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bunks. They had queen beds below and king singles above. This was all. There was a set of stairs with drawers in the stairs. There was built-in TV, built-in wardrobes, and it was all spray lacquer finished, taken down into a whole lot of components. I had to pack it up, rent a giant van, get it into an island off in Auckland Harbour, install it, and it came out perfectly. It fitted the space perfectly. There was like a millimeter gap at the end of it, and a bit of actually no more gap that up, and the thing was perfect. I took all these photos of it, loved it. The clients hated it because apparently it was the wrong color. And I think maybe we talked about this before, but I actually had them sign the color sample. I'd given them 3 options. They picked this particular lady picked the sample, and from then and after that point, it became a massive issue where they were actually blaming me for using the wrong paint. They wanted to know the formulation, like technically the formulation of the paint. They wanted to know who the actual person was who mixed the paint, and then they pretty much said lawyers were getting involved, and I was talking to my lawyer because this was $12,000 of work, and so this dragged on, became a nightmare. I lost $1,800, $1,500 of my final payment, and it just became an absolute nightmare. And it all came down to the client not understanding that light does different things on different sheen levels. And so the color on the wall was matte, the color on the bunk, so semi-gloss, is going to look different. And so my standard, I was right at my standard. This thing was perfect. So for me, I was super happy, but client really not happy.
And I don't suppose you saved the swatch, because that would have made life easier.
They wouldn't send it back.
Yeah, because if you literally just took the swatch and stuck it on the thing and said, "There we go,"
that's what we did. But then they wouldn't give it back to me. So,
jeez, that sounds.
I love it.
That's that's crazy.
They actually eventually said, "Okay," because I was dealing with third party at this point. They said, "Okay, the client chose the wrong paint. We admit that now."
Admitted fault.
Yeah, after trying to blame me. Anyway, we need to get it repainted. Can you come and do it next week at your cost? That was literally what they said. And like, dude,
you're on your own.
Yeah. I said, I'm just walking away at this point.
Jordan, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think that's about summed it up for me.
What I might do is, if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask, start sending them through now, because we'll get to them in a second. I see we've got one already. But one other thing that I wanted to touch on before we go is, I guess good enough depends on your expectation as well. So recently I made a handle for one of my tools. I think it was a paint scraper. It was a little tool that I tried an experiment on, failed miserably. Didn't matter because it was a tool. It wasn't a piece of furniture. But then a nice table that I make, there the expectation is that it has to be of a certain quality. Is it then, should you always be going for that level on everything that you do? So in terms of, that paint scraper, should that have been a pristine thing? Or should you really be measuring your expectations? So it's okay to just be a bit slack sometimes? Or is that just the wrong attitude in our game? You should always be top of your game.
I think circumstantial expectations are good. So, if it's going to be something that's going to get beat up and just thrown around the shop like a tool handle, it doesn't need to be a work of art. But yeah, Joey, go.
Well, okay. So when I make jigs, I was just saying before the show, my jigs are terrible. They don't look fancy at all, but they make fancy things.
Yeah.
So
that's a really cool way to look at it. I like that.
As long as my jig does the thing it's meant to, and jigs are never going to look pretty. They have got to do all sorts of weird things. So yes, I could design it, but then I spent all day designing one jig, and I need to make 14 different ones. So instead, I made 14 in a day and a half. So they're just bits of plywood with bits of plywood screwed to them. No one's ever going to see it. But the chair is everyone's going to see it. So that's a different thing. I thought possibly in the same vein here, this is a note I made, was that when I was thinking about good enough, so good enough to me, first thing I thought was top quality. If it's good enough for you, it must be premium quality. And something to think about is generally top quality work is very wasteful. And if you think about it in terms of selecting timber, you want premium pieces of timber for your tabletop. So you might somehow have come across some like fiddleback blackwood or something, and you're going to make a tabletop out of it. By being that selective and ignoring, say, other parts of that tree, or ignoring other pieces in a bundle, you're encouraging waste and wastefulness. And so that is so is it better to have slightly less quality standards and have less? And it's a different discussion, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, because then you're sort of moving the goalposts as well, and I guess that's why we now live in a world where rustic is a thing, because the junk wood is now being pushed as well. I mean, I say that sounding like a bit of a jackass. I respect that some people do like that style, but I think that might be where it started. Is someone's not going to pay for a piece of wood that's $200 a meter, just that they can get the best piece of wood.
Yeah, I mean that whole thing has made me consider doing a quick and easy line of furniture too. Like, I could batch out a dining table in a day, no worries. I could do quite a few in a day of specific designs. And, if it's not finished to the same level that I'm usually doing, and the joinery, it's just lag screws and everything held together with bolts and all that sort of crap, which people tend to like.
Yeah.
I could make a table for $400.
Yeah.
But do I want to?
Yeah.
I see Fat's workshop. He's just said we used to avoid working for doctors, lawyers, and architects. Their expectations often exceed reality. That's really interesting. I would expect that, particularly from architects.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get to some questions. I have a question for you guys. Darren, we'll get to yours in a second. But I just want to ask you guys this. I've got my lunchbox planer there behind me, and I'm starting to find this on one end of the planer. When I put the boards in, it sort of chews them up like crazy. Like you put them in, and we're taking like 5-10 mil off of snipe going in. Then the board gets in and off it goes, and it's fine. On the other side, though, of the head, on the other side of the planer, goes through smooth.
The outfeed's fine.
This is just one side to the other of the head, right? So left side of the machine.
Left to right.
Yeah. On either side of the head. So the left side of the head versus the right side of the head. So when I'm putting it in, when I'm feeding it in, on the left-hand side, it sounds like it's just chewing up the wood.
Sounds like a worn bearing or something to have the cutter head going.
Does it run? Does it sound smooth when it runs?
Once the board gets into it and the runners pick it up and start moving it, then it's fine.
So the whole head could be wobbling up and down.
The other thing could be if you've got a bit of melamine, fairly thick, like 18 mil minimum, and put that over the entire table. Just take the table rigidity question out of.
I was just going to say, I've had when I had one of those planers, the base of it, the bottom table bench, was really crappily made, and it had like 3 mil of flex in it. And so that could be causing one side. So maybe making a little sled to go inside it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've tried to set the tables as good as I can, but they're just these little washers, and it's a thin piece of tin. It's always going to flex. So I've sort of got into the habit of when I because I'm working with 1800 mil boards now. I sort of bring the board in at a top-down angle, so you obviously don't come in this direction because then you're just going to jam it straight in. Yeah. So you come from a top-down. But yeah, I wasn't sure if because even doing that sometimes, it just mangles the first. Yeah.
Cuffy's just said maybe the in-feed roller spring on one side is pushing down. Yeah.
I mean, it is a cheap unit. It's one of those Hafcos.
I would have thought if the head was loose or the bearing was gone, you would know all about it real quick. Like this thing's going to be jumping all over the place because, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse real quick. So
that spring is actually Cuffy's suggestion is a good one. I had something on my Beast, my 600 mil planer, and that's because this is vintage, but the nut had vibrated loose, so there was no spring tension on one side, but there was on the other, and I was getting really weird cuts. It wasn't necessarily snipe, but it could be rated.
All right.
I see Dan has just jumped on. I have the same plane. I had the similar problem. My problem was some dust caught in the in-feed roller. All right, I'll have a look at that. Maybe that's it as well. I must say, I'm not expecting the world from this. I've tried, I've tried making some adjustments, but at the same time, this is a basic thing that you would expect it to get right. So yeah, I'll give that a go. All right, so we had a question from Darren. Any advice for an 18-year-old building apprentice? So before we get to the question, I want to tell a quick story. In my old house in Adelaide, I used to live next door to a carpenter builder, and I said to him once, I'm thinking of going back to trade school. I want to look into becoming a carpenter. Any advice? Would you recommend it? And he said to me, the problem is, at my age, going into a trade like that, and Joey, maybe you can chime in on this because I think you might have experience with this. At my age, I'm going to be going into a field where there's going to be a foreman who's probably younger than me, and the amount of abuse that I'm going to have to deal with on a daily basis. This neighbor of mine basically said, it's one of those fields where you really want to start, Darren, at 18 and work your way up. You don't want to be a grown man being treated like a child going into it.
Yeah, that's certainly a point of view. That I think I would agree with that. So my answer is going to be probably a little deeper than just giving you a straight advice. Presumably is he an apprentice or just starting out, did he say?
I didn't say. He just said he's 18-year-old building apprentice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got some taste of what the work is. Nothing's really going to change now. Okay, you might end up being in charge of yourself. So are you really happy doing it? Is it awesome every day? Then that's fine. Carry on. And like Robin just said about climbing the ladder, do you want to climb the ladder? And if so, what's at the top? And if it's being a foreman, you might as well not be an apprentice and just go to uni and get the qualifications to jump to the top. Most foremans and kind of site managers and stuff barely been on the tools these days.
Right. I would have just assumed that was a prerequisite.
Not really. Like, especially even if you think about, say, building inspectors these days, just about none of them have been on the tools. They just come from uni with a degree in architecture or something or other, blah, blah. And then now they know how to inspect builders who have been building for 40 years. It's and that is massive tensions. And it will probably take 30 years for the old boys to move out and that whole scheme to become the norm. But at the moment, for me, I would say, do I just want to carry on putting essentially kit sets together? These days, building is not much more than just part A goes into part B, and you don't have much creative choice because you have to follow the plans. So strictly. So while the job needs to be done, it doesn't allow for a lot of creative output. So that's where I'd be in my head thinking, do I just want to stay swinging a hammer, or am I going to do something else?
Sure. That was a serious answer. Now go home and mull over your life decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jordan, you don't have any trade background, do you?
No, well, not really. I mean, I'm theatre sets, so it's very specialized, and the family that is my team is a very close-knit one and very supportive. So I never had that conventional, the apprentice goes to get the left-handed screwdriver and all that sort of stuff. I never experienced anything like that. Possibly because I was a little bit older when I went there. I had already been to uni for my design technologies and all of that I was quite handy on the tools already. So people didn't quite people didn't give me the same amount of crap for, a 17-year-old straight out of school necessarily. But no, I never experienced anything, so I can't say anything other than it's okay to change your mind and drop out of stuff, because if you're not enjoying something, it's a good sign that you're not going to enjoy it for 35 years of your working career. I've been to every uni there is in this state, and I've dropped out of all the courses except one. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you do have to you got to roll with it for a bit. Like you've got to take the bad with the good, I should say. So you've got to accept that there's going to be days that are going to be a write-off. And maybe just don't be too afraid that you might not like it in a couple of years. Coming from a strictly white-collar family, I've put down all of that and said, you know what, I want to be up on a roof building trusses.
Yeah, you can't. You can never know what you don't like until you try it. So you've got to give what you think you are going to like a go, and then be open-minded about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool.
Ross, sorry, what, you going to close it off?
No.
Ross had a question there from Clash Furniture.
Cause you stress?
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yep.
I'll let you guys answer this.
Yep.
Yeah, most of the time.
Always. Mostly it's with finish. Mostly like the construction and the building, not so much anymore, but when it comes to finishing, like I'm not a polisher. I've just, taken tips on from everyone that I can. But yeah, it still stresses me out if I see it's drying at a different rate or whatever. It scares me. I'm like, hang on, I got to walk away for 2 hours and I'll come back, and if it still looks bad, then I'll strip it.
Yeah.
And that in 2 hours, I'm just stressing out because I'm just anyway. Yeah. Yes.
I must say, finishing it never used to be, but I think that's because my standards were a lot lower. Finishing now has become the worst part of the project for me, which is frustrating because it's just before it's done. Yeah, but like I have sleepless nights just thinking about like, how am I going to do this? Am I going to do it right? And as you say, I think the worst thing is when you see the mistake and you've just got to step back and say, well, for the rest of the day, I'm going to hate myself, but there's nothing I can do until this dries, and then I can work on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Time is another big one. Like Clash Furniture Maker said, he finds that time is where a lot of his stress begins, and I'm the same, especially if I got multiple things on the go. And also lack of projects is another stress, being a business owner. Like if I haven't got a few things lined up, that stresses me out because where is the next paycheck coming from? Yeah,
that one I've really been trying to, and it has abated a bit in the last year. Like I get stressed that there's no work lined up, but I have to rely on the fact that it has always come in. And so if I stress about it, it won't come in. But if I just take it easy, something's going to happen and I'll get something come in.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot better at it because every time I've had no work, someone knocks on the door or sends me an email, and it's just, I don't know why it works, it just does, and I won't question it. But
it does stress me a bit more than now that I have an employee.
Yeah, definitely.
That does, tend to keep me awake a little bit.
And I guess ultimately, without sounding stupidly cliche, worrying's not actually, or stressing's not actually going to do anything.
No, exactly.
So just being stressed is a fruitless endeavor.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's bring this to an end. Let's talk about what we've been, or who we've been watching. So, Joey, you want to?
Okay, mine is not a maker, although he did make me laugh, so that works. James Veitch is a comedian, British guy. I think he's British. He does. I guess he got famous from doing pieces where he replies back to spam emails and has these crazy conversations with Nigerian princes and the like. And it's super funny stuff. Go watch it.
I had a look at the channel just before we went on here, and I was looking at it thinking, this is not the channel that I was expecting to see. But hey, he's doing pretty well, and it looks pretty interesting. So yeah, after the show, I'll probably have a look.
Yeah, look at his TED Talk pieces. They are genius.
John, how about you?
I'm not going to pronounce it very well. I think he's German. It's Marius Hornberger, or something along those lines. I've been following him since he was like a really small channel, and now he's got like he's massive growth. But a lot of homemade machines, and he does a bit of furniture stuff here, there, boxes and cutting boards and wood turning and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, just cool German, very particular sort of style, which I like. So yeah, he's awesome.
He hasn't released a video in a very long time, has he?
He did one Dovetail Boxes not that long ago.
He did that big scissor lift thing, didn't he?
And the scissor lift was the one before that. Yeah, he did the scissor lift.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'm subscribed to him, but I haven't seen a video from him for about a month. Maybe more.
I watched one on my phone when I was away last week. So I think one came out last week, or it might have just been a suggested, how YouTube suggests.
Well, there's another channel that I'm subscribed to, and I have been subscribed to them forever. And every now and then I directly go to their homepage to check for new videos, and I suddenly wasn't subscribed. And, there was all that talk last year about all that stuff going on. And I thought, whatever, people are just making up junk about it. It legit happened to me. I went to a guy that, channel that I've been subscribed to, and I was unsubscribed. So that's why I'm just wondering if same thing with Marius.
Yeah, because
he's
also
fantastic.
you have that bell now that you have to click for notifications. And if you haven't done it to the Shop Stool Podcast YouTube page, click that bell. Yeah.
So I've been watching a guy by the name of Scott Turner. He's a local Townsville maker. He does a bit of woodworking, a bit of metalworking. I met him personally a couple weeks ago, and he's actually coming around tomorrow night. We're looking to do a collaboration. So I've got a mango slab that I want to turn into a coffee table. He's probably going to do the legs, make a bit of a collaboration about it. He's just released a video, not his latest video, his video before that, where he's made a cart out of steel and wood. It's amazing. It's one of those shop projects, because it's shop furniture, where you look and you go, please take that out of the shop, put it in your house. It's far too good to be shop furniture. So yeah, anyway, Scott Turner, would highly recommend him. He's got some really cool stuff.
I haven't seen him before. I'll have to check it out.
I think he's fairly, I don't want to say new, but he's been flying under the radar. He actually went to New York a couple months ago, met Tim Sway, Jimmy DeResta, sort of went on the trip and met all of those guys. So yeah,
I was thinking about doing that. Once I was like, man, it seems like if you want to make it, you just go and see these guys.
Yeah,
go for a trip, go to everyone, say hi, and then things will happen.
Yeah,
so I'm going to America. That's it.
Yeah, I see. Scott's watching here. So it was fascinating to hear the stories about those guys. One of the most interesting things that I thought, that he was saying, is that they are all just so normal. Like, we see them as these YouTube celebrities. He says they're just the raddest dudes.
Yeah,
so, yeah. Really cool.
I find that's 99% of the time.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in. As I said, as I've said before, all the links to the channels that we've been watching will be in the description down below, so feel free to go and have a look. Jordan, Joey, is there anything you guys want to mention before you finish up?
Oh, no, maybe. Nope, I think I'm good.
What you should.
Sounded like there was some gold there.
No. I'm on still got holiday brain, so I'm not thinking very clearly.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you all have a very good weekend, and we'll see you same time next Thursday.